So like you said, my mom was, she was 14 when she got pregnant with me and dropped out of school in the 8th grade to have me. Her and my dad actually did get married, but I don't ever remember them being together from the time I was 10 months old. I think they split. So she, she just raised me pretty much on her own. My dad was never in the same state. He didn't pay child support, so I didn't really get to see him regularly. And, just my mom worked, and I just kind of raised myself from the time I was like 7 or 8. I remember Child Protective Services being at the house when I was like 8 years old, asking me, does your mom leave you alone a lot? Somebody must have called. And she had told me to say no. But, I just kind of taught myself how to be a man, and learned what I thought a man was from watching television, and movies, and just trying to figure it out on my own. And we moved around a lot. I'm sure I was insecure, always being the new kid in school. And at some point I thought, if I'm good with girls, that would validate me as being a man. I wasn't consciously thinking that. All I knew is I wanted to be cool and I wanted to be good with girls. And I found a videotape that my mom had rented with her friends of some male strippers when I was like 14 years old. And I popped it in the VCR, and I remember thinking that was what I wanted to be when I grew up. And when I was 19, that's exactly what I did. I started stripping, and, women started coming easily, and I was popular, and I was making a lot of money. And, I didn't really think about God much. I did have a little exposure to Christianity as a kid, because my grandmother was a pretty faithful believer. But I had never heard God's voice, and I'd never felt his presence. So, my life was just a party, and my God was pleasure. And, when I did notice, though, the consequences of the lifestyle, specifically in my relationships, is I would get into these relationships with girls. We would have sex quickly. And I had a lot of casual sex, a lot of one night stands, but sometimes I would sleep with a girl, and then we would continue to have sex, and then we would drift into a relationship. But once I was in the relationship, it would never be that great, to the point where I was looking over my shoulder at other women, and I was, wondering if I could be happier with the next one. And then eventually I'm looking at pornography, and then eventually I'm cheating. So that happened to me a couple times, to the point where I just was like, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not a one-woman man, or maybe human beings aren't really supposed to be monogamous, or, like all the other bullshit we wonder. So I didn't really know. I just assumed it was something like my commitment issues or something wrong with me, because I had dated great girls, like beautiful girls, nice girls, but for whatever reason, I couldn't only have eyes for them as much as I wanted to. I couldn't force myself to do it. And when I was 27 years old, I was at pretty much the height of my, popularity. I was probably the most popular person in Baltimore at the time. I was running the nightlife. I'd just been the biggest stripper in the city. I was in the phone book. I was making a lot of money and my life was a party. And I woke up one day after just a crazy night out, and God spoke to me for the first time. And it wasn't an audible voice, but it was unmistakable that Jesus called me. And he basically said, trust me, follow me. I have a plan for your life. But basically what he told me as it related to my relationships was, he said, look, if you start doing relationships my way, you'll be able to find love. Because I'd never been in love at 27 years old. And it was a radical realization to me at the time, because I'd never even considered the fact was how I started my relationships. That was the problem. I thought something was wrong with me, and it wasn't that. It was the fact that because I wasn't committed to waiting, I wasn't evaluating with really any real criteria outside of, am I physically attracted to her? Mm-hmm. Because I knew in the back of my mind that we were going to have sex. So that's all I'm really asking myself. What would happen, though, is we would have sex, and then we would drift into a relationship. And now I'm asking myself the hard questions after. Can I be happier with someone else, or whatever, the questions are. So at that point, and all I knew is, I still didn't understand the concept of waiting at the time, but I knew that God was real, and I knew that this is the way that he wants you to do it. So I was committed to that. That was all I knew. I didn't understand the concept of waiting at all. So, and I honestly started, I wanted to be obedient to him, but there was also a part of me that thought, okay, if I'm obedient, he'll bring me a wife and I will be able to fall in love for the first time in my life. And that will be awesome. And, so there was a selfish piece in there. So I broke up with my girlfriend at this time. I, quit stripping. I quit promoting. I started going to church. I did like the most radical 180 a person can do.
And this all happened in a very short period of time, like a light switch?
Like a switch. From the moment I heard God's voice, I never did another show. I didn't do drugs again for like 8+ years. Didn't have sex for 6 years from that moment. Went from being the most promiscuous guy and it was very well known that I was promiscuous. I was, the most promiscuous person in the city probably, and everybody knew it. And then I just stopped. And because the moment that you encounter God or Jesus, it's a radical, realization or not, paradigm shift, let's say, because I went from being like, hey, you only live once to going, oh, no, you don't. You actually live forever and everything you do here matters.
What I'm impressed by is that you felt a calling, or you felt God's presence after living this lifestyle in a particular day, on any particular, could have been probably a random day, Tuesday, a Thursday, whatever day of the week it was. And that shifted you instantly. Like, that's a profound, not a lot of people, even Christians, believers, have had those moments.
I've had people say, they talk about Christianity, they're like, oh yeah, that's kind of a crutch. And I'm thinking like, okay, the reason that Jesus called his disciples, or his followers disciples, is because it's the root word of the word discipline. Like, it's not easy to live a disciplined life. Is it easier to be fat or in shape? I'd say it's easier to be fat, in a lot of ways, because you can live undisciplined. That's not a crutch.
Correct.
A crutch, I would say a crutch would be the food that, you're eating like to mask whatever pain you're going through. Like, being a Christian is hard. It's difficult and it requires discipline. And that's a much harder way to live, because you can't have all the crutches. You can't go out and just, have sex with random people or use drugs or whatever it is. You got to just deal with all that, and it's a much, much harder road to take than not being a believer in God, because that's easy. Anybody can live by their flesh. That's easy.
It really is. And I was in that state, I guess you could say, in my 20s, no doubt about it. If I reflect and look back at that, I was working in the restaurant industry while I was in college, making, whatever money I could make, and in relationship with any person I could get in relationship with, and you're attracted to young people, and I was young and fit and really into, my physique and stuff. And so, yeah, you're just living kind of life by your own terms and just free flowing, and every day is just whatever happens. Yep. I didn't, my set of rules was that there were no rules. I just did anything based on what I felt like doing in the moment. And that's only going to take you so far. But on the other side of it too, I'm grateful for those years, because I feel like some of us, maybe if we grow up in a very disciplined life as children, and we never get that opportunity to mess up, to live life on our own terms, to make those big mistakes, to experience things, I think, and it might only be several months, it might be several years that we live that way. But I am grateful for being able to, to go through those times, because I can look back on it and say, I was this way once, and I don't know if you want to say I got it out of my system, but I know what that life looks like, and I know it wasn't going to lead me anywhere really great. And yeah. I wasn't going to surround myself with good people that were going to help me grow and become wise and become financially just better, and find a woman that could become my wife, that I could have a family with, and all these things. You're not going to just get that by going out looking to hook up.
No, I actually started my book with the very first quote I used to start the book was the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. I think it was Walt Whitman that said that, and it really does, because if you live the way, like you said, there is a wisdom that comes with that. But the danger is that you don't come back from it, because imagine like God just says he wants to take you to this place, this promised land. I have this great life for you, Chris, but you say, okay, I'm going to walk in the opposite direction, God, and look, that's great. You can turn around anytime. There's always forgiveness, but the chance of you making it when you walked way out there, making it all the way back here, is a lot harder because the journey's so much longer. And that's what I see happen for my friends that used to party really hard, where they want to make positive changes, but they've walked so far in the wrong direction that they can't make it back because it's just too hard of a journey now. Now I have other friends that have lived a really strict Christian life, and they have that curiosity. They wonder like what the other side is like, because it is enticing. But I tell them, I'm like, listen, comparison's the thief of joy. Like once you experience certain things, it's hard to come back and just appreciate normal. You know what I mean? Where you've taken it up this high, now you come back to here and you're like, So I'm like, look, you got just be good where you're at. You're good. Like, and that's what I think God wants for us. Is he's like, look, I got these boundaries here for your protection. Yeah, it is fun. I look back and I've had the most fun times. I cannot say that they weren't so much fun, but at the same time, a lot of those people didn't make it out. I have friends that, they died early, their whole potential got taken from them. They could have maybe done something, maybe had families. I don't know, but so people say everything happens for a reason. Sometimes the reason those things happen is because we're idiots, like we caused it. But I hear what you're saying, and I wouldn't change anything, because I think it does give me a platform, like to speak to it, because people are like, man, he's been there, he's lived that life, so they listen to me. And I do think God will use anything, but at the same time, there's consequences to the actions. I'm 47 years old. I've still never been in love. I'm still not married, no kids. Like, I don't know. If I would have had a dad around in the house, maybe to model for me what a loving relationship looked like with my mom, maybe to spank me a little when I needed it, like maybe I wouldn't have made a lot of the mistakes, and maybe my life would have been a lot different, better, potentially. I'm not saying that I regret anything, because God is using me and I'm very grateful for that. But I do think that there's, value in living a disciplined life from as early as possible, because I do think, God is all about giving us more, better, bigger, but sometimes when we dig our hole real deep, it's hard to come back from that,
Yeah. Very.
That quote by Henry David Thoreau that says, men live lives of quiet desperation, and I believe a lot of that is attributed to the fact that men don't harness their sexual energy. They don't figure out what they're here for, what their real purpose is. And then they end up choosing the wrong person a lot of times. And then they just sit there and they feel that gnawing sense that they're not living in their purpose, and they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus if you did it the right way, which is, again, stop having sex, or commit to waiting till marriage. And all of a sudden now you're going to see it's a whole different world. It's a whole different filter that you look at people through when you commit.
Yeah.